I call the members to order, and the first item on our agenda this afternoon is questions to the First Minister. And the first question, Vicky Howells.
Will the First Minister outline what actions the Welsh Government is taking to tackle the issue of low pay in Wales?
Well, growing our economy and spreading opportunity are at the heart of our recently published Economic Action Plan, and the plan sets out actions we're taking to improve earnings and prosperity in Wales.
Thank you, First Minister. At the last meeting of the cross-party group on industrial communities, Professor Steve Fothergill presented evidence to us showing the stark association between low pay and the former industrial parts of Wales. Median pay in older industrial areas is just 90% of the UK average. Women are more disadvantaged than men, and median pay in RCT, for example, is just 67% of that found in London. Will you outline how the Welsh Government will be prioritising tackling low pay in the former industrial parts of Wales, like my own constituency of Cynon Valley?
Yes, we're addressing the problems that were caused by the Conservative government in the 90s, where GVA was deliberately suppressed per head as well-paid jobs were removed and replaced with jobs that were on a much lower pay scale. We do recognise, of course, that current inequalities exist in different regions across Wales, and the Economic Action Plan will spread opportunity and prosperity across the whole of Wales. And through implementing the plan, alongside other strategies, we will deliver tangible results focusing on improving the quality of life for all the people of Wales, including the former industrial areas.
Susie Davis.
First Minister, we've recently, as an Assembly, passed legislation, or secondary legislation brought forward by your government, allowing care workers who've been on zero-hour contracts for more than 3 months to transfer to minimum hours contract if they choose to do so. A year ago or so ago, I would say, Bridgend County Borough Council had 344 members of staff, all on zero-hour contracts, although of course not all care workers. Are you considering extending the offer that's being extended to care workers to non-care workers as well, when it comes from transferring from zero-hour contracts to more permanent arrangements?
Well, these are things that we continue to consider. Can I say that fair work is important to us, which is why a Fair Work Board has been convened and is exploring how we can further leverage fair work outcomes from public spending and procurement practice in Wales. I can say the Fair Work Board does view fair and decent wages and a guaranteed hourly income as necessary to ensure greater financial security to individuals and to enable them to access goods and services.
Bethan Jenkins.
First Minister, outlined in your economic contract are calls to action which businesses will be required to follow if they want to get direct Welsh Government support. But none of those calls to action specifically relate to requiring a living wage or any types of incentives along wages specifically. And given that Wales is a low-pay capital with wages £50 less per week than the rest of the UK, will you clarify whether or not businesses which wish to have support from your government will or must pay a living wage as we move forward? And if not, could you explain why not?
Well, I can say that we support, of course, the concept of a living wage. We have produced a guide to implementing the living wage through procurement, which has been made available to private, public and third sector organisations. We have taken decisive action to improve the well-being of workers involved in public sector supply chains in Wales and across the world, launching a code of practice for ethical employment in supply chains in Wales, and that code focuses on guaranteeing good employment practices and includes a commitment to consider paying all staff the living wage as set by the Living Wage Foundation. In terms of fair work, I can say that the board itself, which is being led by Julie James, has made good progress both in defining the meaning of fair work and in identifying the levers by which we can increase the availability of it across Wales.
Question 2, Sian Gwen Lleian.
Question 2, Sian Gwen Lleian. Will the First Minister make a statement on Welsh Government efforts to tackle the issue of homelessness in Arfon?
Tackling homelessness across Wales is a priority for this government, as set out in Prosperity for All. And of course, we support that by budget decisions. At least 357 households have been prevented from becoming homeless in Gwynedd since April 2015 as a result of our legislation, guidance and funding.
The increase in sleeping rough is seen as a problem for Cardiff and the large urban areas, but I am very concerned to see an increase in Bangor, which is developing into a destination for homeless people from across North Wales and beyond. There is some support available to hostels, but we do need a welfare centre in the city where people can access emotional and practical support, and I will be meeting with the agencies this week how we can get such a proposal up and running. Can you confirm that some of the additional funding for tackling homelessness among young people, this funding that you announced in December, can you confirm that some of that will be spent in Bangor?
Well, there is a question here for the Gwynedd Authority. Gwynedd was the only authority in Wales not to seek funding under a programme we issued last summer to tackle homelessness amongst young people and rough sleepers. And the officials have met with the local government officers and have urged them to ensure that they do take advantage of every opportunity to tackle this problem. As regards the funding that has been issued, we will look at the best way to see the optimum results.
Mark Isherwood.
At last September's Digodref Ynys Môn and Bangor University event in the Assembly, we heard homeless young people themselves debating youth homelessness in Wales, and they said young people living in supported accommodation could have a host of issues to deal with and may struggle with this alongside studying and assignments. Last Friday, I visited the Hub project, Grŵp Penevin's Hub project in Denbigh, to visit the supported accommodation project there, supporting young people and preparing them for independent living, and also the Denbigh Youth Shed, designed and created by young people from the Hub project, working with Scott Jenkinson and the 428 training group, to provide a safe place for young people to explore who they are, develop pro-social relationships with suitable role models, and develop and learn skills. Will you firstly join me in congratulating those young people on forming the first youth sheds in Wales, and secondly confirm whether the Welsh Government will support them in their vision to give every town in Wales a youth shed?
Well, the question is about Arfon, but it's an important question, which I will answer. I mean, firstly, of course, I join with him in congratulating the initiative that young people have shown. I'd like to know more about it, and I'd be more than happy, of course, to receive further information as to how, what the process was in establishing the youth shed and how perhaps the model can be adopted across Wales.
Cwestiynau nawr gan Arwain.
Questions now from the party leaders. Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Davis.
Presiding Officer, First Minister, last Friday, the Permanent Secretary released her report into the leak inquiry that you commissioned from her around the cabinet reshuffle that took place in November of last year. The report indicated that there had been no unauthorised leaking. Are you confident that there was no authorised leaking, and will you make that report available so that we can read through that report and actually come to our own conclusions?
Yes, I'm confident there was no authorised leaking, as he has put it. But can I say there's a very important point here to remember? People came forward to give evidence to this leak inquiry on the basis of confidentiality. What he is asking the Permanent Secretary to do, because it's her decision, is to out those people, for the evidence to be made available and their names. Such a course, I have to say, would be both dishonourable and dishonest and would bring the Welsh Government into disrepute. Secondly, there are other inquiries that are ongoing. It's hugely important that people feel able to come forward to give evidence to those inquiries. Now, if they are not able to have the assurance that they are going to be able to give evidence confidentially, then they will not come forward. There is a real risk that if the action that is, this is not what he's urging on me, but what the action he's urging on me could lead to witnesses being intimidated and not coming forward. That is not something that he is actively suggesting, I understand that, but that is the outcome of that. And so it is hugely wrong for any inquiry where people are asked to give evidence confidentially to then find that their evidence is in fact going to be made public and their names. That does not help in terms of bringing or encouraging people to come forward with evidence in further inquiries.
I would agree with you, First Minister. I want to create an environment that encourages as many people as possible to engage with the various inquiries that are looking into the events surrounding the Cabinet reshuffle of last November. And certainly it would be my intention to out anyone, because that would be against the principles of any inquiry or investigation. But it's not unreasonable for myself or any other members, in light of any one of 101 tweets I could point to, and I just use this one tweet that is on social media, told by sources that Carl Sargent, Community Secretary, is losing, an important thing, not lost, losing his job. And that was before the cabinet reshuffle had happened. Now, that's not unreasonable, and I could point to many others from other journalists and also lobbyists who used the same sort of language. So it is not unreasonable for people who have witnessed what has gone on to pose the question why such language was being used by people in a professional position and people we know had access to the government information machine to put such messages out there. And again, I'd ask you, using the redaction process and making sure people's identity was covered, that this report is made available so that we can consider its findings as we consider many other reports that are made available to this Assembly.
So it's Twitter now, is it, that is used in order to judge whether Twitter is not evidence. Twitter is not evidence, Twitter is gossip. There has been an inquiry. That inquiry was conducted by the government's head of security. Unless there is evidence that the Welsh Conservatives have that inquiry was in some way compromised, then the inquiry is over. I have given him the answer that he is required, and I have to say to him, I am not prepared, it's not my decision, it's the Permanent Secretary's, but I am not prepared to countenance a situation where people are told, come forward, give evidence confidentially, and then they are told, oh, now we're going to release all your evidence and your names. That brings the government into disrepute.
No one's asking for names, First Minister, and there is plenty of processes you can point to where people's identity is protected. I did point to Twitter, but I pointed to social media as well. I've given you the examples here. That's the language from professional people that was using around the time of the cabinet reshuffle. And they were using it 2 or 3 days prior to the reshuffle. I would hope that you can be exonerated and that some of the horrendous allegations that are levelled at the government and at yourself can be discounted, because ultimately we know what tragedy followed from it. But it is difficult for myself and other members and interested parties to have confidence in reports that we are prevented from seeing. Now, I hear what you said twice to me today. I have 3 questions. There must be a way of allowing information to come forward that is redacted, that can give confidence, that the opinions that have been formed around some of the allegations can be discounted by this report. And not having sight of this report makes it very difficult to argue that case. And I would argue for you to sit down with the Permanent Secretary and come up with a formula that will allow us to have sight of as much of the report as possible, preventing any disclosure of names or identifications of people, so that we can have that confidence. Because the evidence, as I pointed, I could pull out many other examples, pointed to information that was already in the public domain before ministers and cabinet secretaries came in to have that discussion with you. That's a fact.
I have to say, if anything's Twitter is evidence, then by all means, do never give evidence in court. Never give evidence in court. It is innuendo, gossip, tittle-tattle, the kind of thing that some politicians love. I deal in evidence. There has been an inquiry. That inquiry has gone forward. People were invited to give evidence to that inquiry, and it was a matter for them whether they give evidence or not. Giving evidence to the inquiry was important. We encourage people to come forward. That inquiry is now finished. The fact it doesn't sit with the strange conspiracy theories of some people, I'm afraid, cannot be helped. But unless there is evidence that members have that somehow the head of security of the Welsh Government was compromised, that the Permanent Secretary was compromised, the inquiry has reported, and the inquiry is clear in terms of the results of that inquiry.
The UKIP Group, Neil Hamilton.
First Minister has seen the report from the Centre for Cities entitled Cities Outlook 2018, which estimates that 112,000 jobs may be at risk in Cardiff, Newport and Swansea as a result of automation. There are those who unkindly say, of course, that Welsh Labour has led the way in robotics, but there's a serious point here as well, because The areas which are most likely to be affected by automation adversely are those areas which are already deindustrialised and where unemployment is highest. In fact, in Allen and Deeside, according to this report, faces the largest threat of 35% of jobs at risk from automation. So can the First Minister tell the Assembly what concrete plans the Welsh Government has to deal with this looming threat that lies ahead of us?
Automation is very much part of the economic action plan, and how we deal with automation is very much part of that. I know that there are many of my colleagues who sit on the back benches, Lee Waters amongst them, who's been very vocal about the need for us to face this challenge. And as I say, it is something that has been recognised in the economic action plan as something that we have to deal with. Now, how that is done depends on how fast automation goes, predicting which sectors will be automated first, and then, of course, upskilling our people. Training our people to look at new jobs is a hugely important part of ensuring that we have jobs in the future.
Well, I have no difficulty in agreeing with the First Minister on that, and indeed paying tribute to the role of Lee Waters in raising this issue in the Assembly. But there are other things that can be done as well. The areas which are most likely to be affected by this, again, according to not only this report, but also one by another organisation called Future Advocacy, says that 1 in 5 jobs in every constituency in the whole of the United Kingdom could disappear by 2030. And in the cities in particular, these are affected mostly by mass immigration. And without leaving the single market, of course, we won't be able to recover control of our borders and select the groups which have the skills that we will need in future, whilst also controlling the flow of those who will actually exacerbate problems which are going to take place of their own accord in any event. Even on the latest figures, which were substantially down on the previous period, net migration stands at 230,000 a year. Newport, Swansea, Cardiff and Wrexham are the cities that are most affected by this in Wales. These are the areas also which are most likely, therefore, to see wage compression further exacerbated as a result of automation. So will the First Minister not now accept that some sensible controls on migration are necessary, and that does mean leaving the single market?
Well, no, it doesn't, because, of course, that would destroy the market that we sell in. He knows full well that 60% of what we export go to the single market, 90% of food and drink goes to the single market. If those exports are jeopardised, if demand drops for what we produce in those markets, we lose jobs. It's that simple. It's not a question of immigration, it's a question of making sure that we have the markets that we need in order to sustain demand for what we produce, and then, of course, be able to sell. And we know that the European single market is most important. If we cannot cut a deal with the European single market, there is no hope for cutting a deal with any other market.
I certainly don't agree with that at all. And it's not the case that trade will suddenly seize up if we leave the single market. It'll affect certain sectors more than others. That's certainly true. But there's massive scope for import substitution given the huge trade deficit that we've got with the EU. But I don't want to pursue that line any further now. The other point that I want to make, though, is the pressure on housing in the whole of the country, and particularly in South East Wales. We're likely to see this increase as a result of getting rid of the tolls on the Severn Bridge, which we're all in favour of, but nevertheless there's bound to be some effect on the local property market as a result of the difference in house prices on this side of the Severn compared with on the other side of the Severn. The ONS has said that rents in the UK have gone up by 23% in a decade, which is faster than the growth in incomes. So again, the pressure is upon those who are at the bottom of the income scale more than anywhere else. And towns like Newport, of course, are relatively poor towns in income terms. So will the First Minister agree with me that these are pressures that need to be taken fully into account, and there needs to be a policy on the part of the Welsh Government for doing something about this?
We need more houses. Yes. And it would help, of course, people didn't object to every single housing application that appeared on their doorstep, which we know has happened in the past, and his party are well known for that opposition. We as a government have a target of 20,000 affordable homes. We're well on track to deliver that, and we need to make sure that the pressure is taken off the housing market by ensuring that there is more supply of houses. And as a government, it's precisely what we're doing.
On behalf of Plaid Cymru, Rhyn ap Iorwerth, thank you, Llywydd. First Minister, when there are lengthy waiting lists for treatment, private health companies give patients the opportunity to avoid those waiting times by paying a fee, and many constituents have informed me that they have been encouraged to consider paying to go private for treatment or swifter diagnosis, and that means that treatment becomes something that is based on the ability to pay. Now, do you agree with me that that is akin to creating a two-tier health system, and isn't that gradual privatisation, if truth be told?
Well, as you know, we are completely against privatisation, and that is why we have spent more on health than ever before in order to ensure that the services are available for our people.
Role of privatisation. There's another form of creeping privatisation going on that I can point you to. Are you aware that under your watch there are plans to privatise more dialysis services in the north of Wales? And we're not talking here about the contracting of a company to do a particular job of work, say tackling a backlog of elective surgery. We're talking about outsourcing core NHS services to a private company. And figures seen by Plaid Cymru suggest that the saving will be around £700,000, and much of that saving, it seems, will come from staff entitlements to sickness pay, to holiday pay and pensions. You must agree that that is creeping NHS privatisation. Well, the facts as he put it, I cannot agree with. No, I agree with him, but I'm not aware of the situation as he describes it. But if he writes to me with details, I will, of course, investigate. I'll certainly send Betsy Cadwaladr's plans for the increased privatisation of dialysis to you. Those two examples are very, very different. But there's a common theme there, I think, of private companies playing an increasing role in healthcare, picking away at NHS services. And I'm not really driven by ideology on this. At the end of the day, surely we want a better NHS for both patients and staff. But profiting from waiting times, profiting from core services, creating a two-tier system where the rich get signposted to quicker treatment, outsourcing to cut costs to the detriment of hard-working NHS staff, this is not acceptable. We know it's wrong. I'm quite confident that the public think it's wrong. So why is Labour in Wales allowing it to happen? No, we are not. But I'm surprised to hear him say he's not driven by ideology, because we are. I can tell you on these benches. And we are driven by the ideology of making sure people have an NHS free at the point of service. Now, if Plaid Cymru doesn't believe in that, or doesn't know an ideology on the health service of all things, then perhaps they could tell us more. No, we do not agree with privatisation. That is why, of course, we have set our face against initiatives such as PFI, set our face against initiatives that we see in England, where the NHS is being privatised. In Wales, the NHS will remain in the public sector.
Question 3.
Question 3, Adam Price. What guidance has the Welsh Government provided to local health boards on the transformation of clinical services?
Welsh Government expects health boards to work together with the public, their staff and others to design and deliver sustainable services which ensure the best possible health outcomes for the population. The guiding principles are contained within the NHS planning framework.
Last week, First Minister, in relation to the options being considered by Hywel Health Board, you said that the Welsh Government had no policy at present, but that you may have a policy at the end of the process. Isn't the problem here that you wouldn't have a mandate for any of these options because none of them were mentioned during the Assembly election campaign? So for us to have a minimum democratic accountability, would you commit to holding a vote in this Parliament if one of these options were to be recommended by government? And could we assume that that will be a free vote, given that one of your own ministers has already committed, and this is evidence from social media, has committed to oppose any recommendation which would close hospitals, whatever the government policy? Or will the First Minister censure this minister, as you did for a former minister in very similar circumstances, and he was called Leighton Andrews?
Well, why isn't he participating in the process then? Because I can say that the Health Board has been working with elected politicians. They've been working in order to ensure that a working party was established with representatives from across the political parties and also councillors in order to ensure, please listen and learn, to see what the transformation work is. And may I say, Adam Price, it's extremely important that people know this. He released a press statement with Jonathan Edwards saying, I have to meet with the Health Board as soon as possible. What is the view of the Labour government? Well, I can say that the Health Board tried to contact his office on the 8th of December. An email was sent to Adam Price inviting him to meet with the Health Board in order to discuss any concerns that he may have. No reply. And then on the 8th of January, once again, an email was sent inviting him to speak to the Health Board. No response. So he has even been offered a call, a telephone call with the Health Board on the 20th of January, but he turned that down. So he's great at grandstanding in this place without doing the work on behalf of his constituents.
Paul Davis.
Putin's Russia, goodness gracious me, attacking.
Paul.
Truth
Paul
hurts.
Davis.
Truth hurts. You've been caught out. You've been
Paul
caught out.
Davis.
You've been caught out.
Privilege information against the members.
Oh, you've been caught out. You've been caught out.
What's this? Raga Raga.
I would just say that the local health board probably has information regarding whether I answered emails or phone calls to them as well. I wouldn't personally want that shared in this place. Paul Davis.
No, you've got out.
Okay, Digon. Paul Davis. Paul Davis.
What an idiot. What an idiot.
Prif Weinidog.
Paul Davis.
Prif Weinidog.
First Minister, if we could return to the issue. 5 of the 9 options being considered by the Hywel Dda University Health Board would lead to the closure of Withybush Hospital, and naturally this is entirely unacceptable to the people of Pembrokeshire. So in those circumstances, when it comes to any consultation, what assurance can you give the people I represent that any consultation will be meaningful and will truly represent the views of local people? And what will you, as a government, be doing to ensure that this happens? Because the people I represent have no confidence in the Hywel Dda Health Board at the moment.
Well, as I said, a working party has been established in order to secure the views of politicians across the political spectrum and also councillors so that they can be part of the transformation work. So there is an open invitation to the elected members and others so that they can play a part in that process.
First Minister, we accept that we can't deliver the same health service in the same way we did 70 years ago.
Sorry. Can't hear the question.
My Cymru group is agitated, but I understand why they may well be agitated. But can we allow questions to proceed, please? Caroline Jones.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, we accept that services have to change, but we can't deliver the same way health that we did 70 years ago. However, any change has to be based upon clinical need and be clinically led. And by that, I don't mean the clinical director of the local health board. Change needs to be driven by the doctors and nurses and supported by doctors and nurses. I have been contacted by a number of staff protesting about the merger of wards at Morriston Hospital, which has proceeded without the support of clinical staff. Staff believe the change is financially driven. First Minister, can you guarantee that financial pressures will not lead to further such changes in future?
Financial pressure is not the issue here. It's a question of making sure that a service is sustainable, that they can attract the right staff and the right level of staff, and that is what guides the guidance that we give to the health boards, namely that they want to put in place a safe and sustainable service.
Question 4, Janet.
Question 4, Janet Finn Saunders.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, you may recall that I've previously raised on numerous occasions my concerns and those of my constituents. Oh, I beg your pardon. I do. Yeah. Will the First Minister make a statement on the provision of mental health services in North Wales?
Yes, improving mental health services across the whole of Wales continues to be a priority for the Welsh Government, and we've committed a further £40 million specifically for mental health services over the next 2 years.
Thank you, First Minister. I have previously raised with you my immense concerns on behalf of my constituents about the current mental health provision in the Betsy Cadwallader Board in North Wales. Last term, I referenced correspondence from Professor David Healy, who is a widely respected consultant psychiatrist in North Wales. At that time, he raised issues around staff morale, suitability of staffing arrangements, the exit of senior nurses from the service. Now, again, a recent letter that I've now received a copy from Professor Healy to the Cabinet Secretary raises further concerns and notes that following his visits to some mental health services within the Betsy Board, in his words, in the August unit, he was presented with a scene from Dante's Purgatory, or Hell. On arrival at Roslin Mental Health Centre, he found an equally apocalyptic scene. Now, this theme correlates directly with constituents' views when they come to see me, needing this desperate support. He finishes by saying, you now have every locum in the UK steering clear of here and patients finding themselves in settings unimaginable a few years ago. It's an extraordinary fall from grace. Now, this service, First Minister, is failing and was in fact the primary trigger for the special measures being put in place. Now, 2.5 years later, this service is in a mess. The response from the Cabinet Secretary shows disinterest. Now, will you take this matter seriously? Will you take this? I have your response here.
Just the question to the First Minister. Don't get diverted.
I have the letter to Professor Healy. I have the response. First Minister, I would like to share these with you. But I am asking on behalf of my constituents, on behalf of the staff who work in these units, will you please look at this service more carefully and actually maybe have a conversation with the Cabinet Secretary and perhaps just get him to show a little bit more enthusiasm and concern when issues of this nature are raised about mental health services in North Wales.
I think it's hugely unfair to suggest that the Cabinet Secretary is not concerned. He is somebody who is passionate about the health service, and that certainly is not the impression he gives to the public, that I'm sure. I am aware, as a member has written to the Chief Executive of the Health Board, so the number of concerns about the provision of mental health services in North Wales. We have asked the Chief Executive of BCU to meet with you in person as soon as possible to discuss your concerns. In terms of the comments around the operation of Conwy Community Mental Health Team, I know that the Chief Executive and Mental Health Director met the Local Authority Scrutiny, or met rather, the Local Authority Scrutiny Committee last week to discuss concerns and actions directly with them.
Question 5, David Melding.
Question 5, David Melding.
Minister make a statement on the support that is available for children and young people with additional learning needs in Wales.
Well, local authorities are responsible for providing a suitable education for all children and young people, including those with additional learning needs. By reforming the current system, we want to transform expectations, experiences and outcomes for children and young people with additional learning needs.
First Minister, you would probably have heard that Ffeisic Cymru, which is the charity that supports people and parents with children with speech and language learning difficulties, the charity is closing its Cardiff office tomorrow and close its North Wales office at the end of March. This is a charity that has very deep roots in South Wales, founded over 40 years ago. Will continue to have a service from its London headquarters. But I'm very concerned that current policy, which has reduced core funding to key organisations, I understand the logic behind that, but combined with the temporary nature of lottery funding, we are losing key skills and vital support networks. And these charities are faced with obtaining the equivalent of administrative support from a great many bodies, education authorities and health boards across Wales. We really do need a strategy to ensure that this expertise is maintained because it's of such great public benefit, particularly when we're reforming an essential aspect of the law.
Well, I'm disappointed to hear the decision to close Ffeisic Cymru. I do understand that Ffeisic, a UK-based charity, will still offer advice and support to families in Wales. It is, of course, the responsibility of health boards to ensure they provide adequate access to therapy services, including speech, language and communication therapy. and speech and language therapy is provided to all children and young people who are identified as having a need. We will, of course, monitor the closure of Phasic Cymru on service users.
Llyr Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. Dwi'n falch i
Thank you, Llywydd. I'm pleased to hear that you will be monitoring this situation, because we also know that as the budgets of a number of schools where many of us are governors, the budgets are shrinking, and that means that the only true saving that many schools can do is to reduce the staff numbers. Classroom assistants are very often the first to be cut, and in a climate where the government, and of course we welcome the fact that you have legislated in order to strengthen the support for pupils with additional learning needs, very often it's those classroom assistants who are in the front line providing that additional support. So what assessment have you carried out of the impact that shrinking budgets and the loss of classroom assistants is having on the new Act and the hoped success?
Well, a package of funding, £20 million, has been put in place to support the Act itself, and all associated with Act. It includes, for example, developing the workforce, ensuring that the people in the workplace have the skills in order to work effectively within the new system, and also to ensure that things improve for the learners. The funding is in place, and we understand how important that is.
Question 6.
Question 6, Mandy Jones.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the treatment of chronic conditions in North Wales?
Well, we're taking a range of actions to prevent, diagnose and treat chronic conditions, both nationally and at health board level, and these actions are set out in a suite of strategies and delivery plans.
Thank you. First Minister, most of the community-based services for chronic conditions are still only available on weekdays, and there is a need to better coordinate the work of the different staff groups and teams that care for patients with chronic conditions. What efforts is the Welsh Government making to address these problems?
Well, we know that the Health Board is working hard to meet the pressures and challenges in waiting times in the North, and I know that this is something that the Cabinet Secretary takes personal interest in. In terms of chronic conditions, I can say in the VCU area, the number of emergency admissions has fallen, and the number of emergency readmissions has also fallen. And that's as a result of actions taken over the past few years across North Wales and indeed across Wales as a whole.
Darren Miller.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, you'll be aware that there's been some concern expressed over the past few days about death rates in Glenclwyd's emergency department. The mortality rates in that emergency department are double what they were just a few years ago, and this is a cause of great concern for my constituents, many of whom are served by that hospital in emergency situations. Do you accept that the situation in North Wales is not acceptable, and given that this is a health board which is in special measures, what action is the Welsh Government going to take to investigate why this hospital death rate has doubled in recent years, why it's the worst in Wales, and what action are you going to put in place in order to ensure that this situation is resolved urgently?
Well, those A&E figures will be affected heavily by the age of patients attending and the severity and complexity of their illness on attendance, all of which would impact, of course, on the risk of death. Now, the particular measure reported involves small numbers. It's consequently not age-adjusted, and age is likely to be the main reason why this figure seems high, not least reflecting that Conwy has the highest percentage of over 75s in the whole of Wales. Now, more recent figures from the Health Board show some reduction in the peak reported. The overall in-hospital mortality rates for Ysbyty Glenclwyd are in line with the Welsh average. But I can say, of course, that the figures that he has mentioned are being used by the Health Board to look in detail at what is contributing to the numbers of deaths in the emergency department and across the site. And we do expect all deaths in hospital to be subject to an individual review to help identify themes to drive improvements in care, as well as sharing good practice.
Question 7.
Question 7, Rhiannon Passmore.
How is the Welsh Government working to increase economic output for the communities of Is-deitlau?
Well, we're investing in developing the skills of our people, improving our infrastructure and supporting a competitive business environment.
Diolch. First Minister, on the 15th of January, the Cardiff Capital Region Cabinet unanimously agreed to support in principle, the £180 million redevelopment of Wales' capital city's main transport hub, with £40 million of City Deal funding. The money from the City Deal's investment fund will aim to assist with securing match funding from the UK Government, Welsh Government, as well as the private sector to deliver the project. First Minister, it is a fact that 85% of Wales' capital city job growth has arisen from an increase in net commuting into the city from adjacent communities like Is-deitlau. Therefore, what can the Welsh Government do to ensure that the economic benefits of a modernised Cardiff Central train station, a new Cardiff Central bus station and other innovative integrated transport infrastructure will benefit my constituencies who will continue to commute to Cardiff for work?
Well, through our work on the Ministerial Task Force for the Valleys and, of course, the development of the Metro, we are looking to support change, maximise opportunities and improve economic outcomes in the valleys. And we will place a particular emphasis on maximising benefits from new initiatives such as the Metro, such as city regions and city deals to support those who commute into Cardiff. We'll also build on previous regeneration policies and programmes with the aim of creating better opportunities within the valleys, reducing, of course, the need to commute.
Mark Reckless.
First Minister, last week I was privileged to attend the Severn Growth Summit organised by the Secretary of State for Wales, and really looking to maximise the benefit we can receive from when the Severn tolls are abolished at the end of this year. First Minister, what are you and what are Welsh Government doing to ensure that we in Wales reap the maximum possible benefit from the end of those tolls, and particularly in Is-deitlau, in Cyflwynir Council area, what are you doing to ensure that we can see more housing, more regeneration and more opportunity to benefit not just people commuting to Cardiff, but people commuting to Bristol, and even more importantly, bringing in economic development and jobs into those valleys communities?
His idea of a privilege is different to mine, but I can say this to him. The one thing we will not do is say that somehow there is no difficulty with Brexit no matter how it happens, because we know that the economy of Is-deitlau and the whole of the valleys will be affected adversely by a hard Brexit. We are working, of course, through the Economic Action Plan to develop regeneration and jobs. We're working to develop more housing through our housing target, affordable housing of 20,000 homes. And I have to say, I hear what the Secretary of State says about connecting the south-east of Wales with the south-west of England. It's a shame the UK Government wouldn't allow us to run a train service between Cardiff and Bristol Temple Meads, which is a shame because that would help, of course, to link the areas economically.
Question 8.
Question 8, Mohammed Ashkar.
First Minister, what action will the Welsh Government take to improve the economy of South East Wales in the 5th Assembly, please?
Well, the Prosperity for All National Strategy and Economic Action Plan set out the actions we're taking to improve the economy and business environment across Wales.
Thank you very much for the reply, Minister. The evolution of tolls in the Severn crossing at the end of this year will remove one of the barriers hindering economic prosperity in South East Wales. You just heard earlier also. Last week, the Secretary of State for Wales, Alan Cann, held a summit in Newport on how we can transform the economic and cultural prospects of South Wales and the southwest of England, making it easier to businesses to increase inward investment and tourism to create jobs in the area, both sides of the channel, I mean. Will the First Minister join me in welcoming this initiative, and can he confirm that the Welsh Government will work with the UK Government in developing these links to improve living standards and job prospects in South East Wales?
Well, there was an event on the 22nd of January, I understand, which officials unofficial attended from Welsh Government. Now, we're more than happy to actively participate in this initiative. We know that joint working will be beneficial for Wales and our regions, and I'm sure there'll be more events such as this in which we will continue to contribute. But, of course, what is hugely important is this is not run solely by the Secretary of State. This is a joint initiative between the Welsh Government, Welsh local authorities and those across the border.
Question 9.
Question 9, Russell.
Will the First Minister make a statement on a bowel cancer screening in Wales?
We have a well-established national population bowel screening programme in Wales, with nearly 147,000 men and women screened during 2016 to 17. And we continually look at ways to increase uptake, and recently announced the introduction of better and more user-friendly testing, which will be rolled out from January 2019.
Thank you for your first answer, First Minister. Certainly, a constituent has contacted me, who is over the age of 74, and their concern is they haven't been able to self-refer for a screening test themselves. This is something which is available in other parts of the UK, in England, Scotland and Northern Ireland, as I understand it. I would be grateful if the Welsh Government could consider following the position of the UK Government and the other devolved administrations across the UK.
Yeah. So, did you mention, was it FIT you mentioned?
It was the bowel screening testing for over 74s.
Okay. Well, we recently agreed to implement a more sensitive and user-friendly testing regime for bowel cancer screening in Wales. It's a key action within the revised cancer delivery plan. The rollout of FIT within the bowel screening programme in Wales is planned for January 2019, and it's hoped it'll be more user-friendly and will improve uptake, and that new test is expected to result in an increased demand for colonoscopy as a result of better uptake and slightly increased sensitivity.
Question 10, Neil Hamilton.
Question 10, Neil Hamilton.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the governance of NHS Wales Health?
Well, NHS bodies need to ensure that they have robust governance in place and act in a manner that upholds the values set for the Welsh public sector.
Well, one of the areas of governance that perhaps needs to be reconsidered as a result of today is the maintenance of confidentiality between health boards and Assembly members, and perhaps the First Minister will address that in response. But the question I wanted to raise, prompted by what's going on in Hywel Dda at the moment, is the level of public dissatisfaction with the method by which decisions are taken and the lack of democracy in the National Health Service in Wales. UKIP stood in the last Assembly election on a policy of making health boards elected, 6 out of the 11 in our proposal, for 5 professional executives, so that people who are going to be affected by decisions that are taken have a chance to elect the people who are making those decisions for them. What's happening at the moment is that people feel that whatever is going to emerge from this process will be something that's imposed upon them rather than something in which they've had any real role in developing.
Well, as I said, the Chair of the Health Board has confirmed that she will establish a reference group with representatives invited across political parties and elected members at county level to regularly update them on transformation work. That meeting will take place on a monthly basis, and invitations will be sent to all AMs, MPs and elected council members.
Finally, Angela Burns. Presiding Officer, First Minister, the Parliamentary Review recommends that Good Governance institutes maturity matrix as a way of measuring good governance in health boards. How do we measure good governance now?
Well, through their delivery, they have to ensure, of course, a safe and sustainable service in their areas, and I believe that they do that. There will occasionally be difficult decisions that they'll have to take. We know that. What is hugely important, though, that we are able to measure them in terms of their public engagement. There have been problems in the past around this, and not least in Hywel Dda. That's why I do very much welcome what the Chair of the Health Board has said.
Prif Weinidog, point of
Thank you, First Minister. Point of order arising from questions. A point of order under Standing Order 13.9. The Data Protection Act says that no one should use data in ways that have unjustified adverse effects on the individuals concerned, and that you should handle people's personal data only in ways they would reasonably expect. We're all data controllers in our own offices here in the Assembly, of course. Now, the standing orders say that the presiding officer has a clear role in overseeing whether members engage in conduct which constitute an offence. On those grounds, would UKIP give an undertaking to review the response given by the First Minister to a question raised by Adam Price, the member for Carmarthen East? I think we're talking here about improper use of data. We are talking about access that government ministers have to information being held by public services in Wales about Assembly members, and we're talking about an issue of privileged information being used by government to attack a member of this Assembly.
Yes, First Minister.
A statement was sent out by the member and another, which said we will be keeping a close eye on these proposals as they develop and intend meeting with Health Board representatives at the earliest opportunity. It is legitimate, in my mind, to point out that opportunities have been offered. It is perfectly legitimate and open to scrutiny members say they want to meet at the earliest opportunity, it's important that there is an understanding amongst the public that opportunities have been offered. And that is something that's apparently... I heard Rhyn ap Iorwerth without interrupting him. Perhaps he will grant me the same courtesy and the rest of his parliament.
He will grant you that courtesy. And thank you for your response and the point of order. I have noted what's been said here this afternoon. I will give some further consideration to the sharing of data and its relevance to our standing orders here. But that is a matter that I will look at further and return to if needs be. I am now moving on to the next item of the agenda. We don't need further comment on that now, because we are moving on to the next item on the agenda.